Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta on Wednesday night, February the 9th. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And chat room is open there if you want to sit in their chat room and hang out. And my voice is kind of going and kind of getting over a cold, trying to get over a cold. Or some sort of a bad flu bug or something. I don't know, but I was really sick. And so my voice isn't that great. Sorry about that. It's not even that great at the best of times, but right now it's really not that great. So if you can bear with me. I just couldn't see skipping any more shows. I had already skipped my whole weekends worth of shows. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. And all those who were there when I wasn't there, sorry about that. And glad to be able to do these shows. You know, it's just awesome. I almost have 22,000 shows listened to, and I know lots of people are tuning in, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I have to say, and you know, day after day, you know, show after show. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope somebody's getting something out of it. I know I'm learning a whole lot, and you know, it's great to be a voice for these children out here, and this is really what I want to do for the rest of my life is public awareness, public speaking. And just, you know, getting the information out that child abuse has got to stop. You know, it is totally preventable, 100% preventable, because child abuse is a choice. Abuse is a choice. People choose to do what they're doing, right? So that's why I feel like we can stop this, and I think it should be this generation, right? Why not? I keep saying it, but it's so true. And so thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'm not a counselor or therapist, and you have to listen to my shows at your own discretion. I talk about abuse, and I don't sugarcoat it. I just tell it like it is. And it's a sensitive, very sensitive subject for a lot of people. For me, it's no problem listening to it because I grew up abused. I grew up being abused, and I've had to deal with this my whole life. So I don't mind talking about it. But I know a lot of people, you know, it can be a very sensitive topic. So if you're not comfortable with this type of information, you know, it is clearly your discretion. You have to listen at your own discretion. So you make sure that you're okay to listen to it. And if not, you turn the show off. And young people under the age of 18. I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows from an adult, someone who, you know, a parent, caregiver, someone who's older who can help you make the decision whether you should be listening or not. Like, I'm not sure who's listening to my shows and where the Blog Talk players are, because people can put those around on different websites, right? So I just believe in protecting children at all times, right? I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers Abused Children, and we stand up, you know, to protect children's lives, to try to save children's lives. And if you don't know how to keep yourself safe online, make sure you get that information, right? I say this on every show. It's so important to me because you do not want to be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile. And they are out there by the thousands, every day and every night, looking for children who don't know how to keep themselves safe online, right? They obviously can't get a hold of the children who do know how to keep themselves safe online. So they're looking for those children who don't know how to protect themselves, right? The vulnerable kids, right? The kids who don't have the information. That's who they're looking for. So you make sure that you get the information and you keep yourself safe so that you will not ever be a victim of a child sexual predator or pedophile, right? It's very important. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. Now we'll get right into this topic. I wanted to talk about neglect, child abuse and neglect fatalities, statistics, and interventions. And this is a PDF that I pulled up from Child Welfare Information Gateway. There's just tons and tons of information on that website. If you go there, you can just dig around. They have a library full of publications from A to Z. And there's so much information there. You know, that's a great resource for people who are looking for information regarding child abuse and neglect and all the different types of abuse, prevention information, just everything to do with an adult survivor issue information. I mean, there's everything on there. So, you know, you can go and check that out. That's www.childwelfare.gov, and that's the Child Welfare Information Gateway. They have lots and lots of great info there. And this particular, it's a PDF I downloaded, but you can just look at the article right online there. If you go there, this was published in April 2010, and it's numbers and trends. It's child abuse and neglect fatalities, statistics, and interventions. But I wanted to take a look at this because neglect is a huge issue, and a lot of times people don't realize it. Mainly we say we need to stop child abuse. That's what most advocates will say. Let's stop child abuse, because neglect is abuse, right? And most people don't throw neglect in there. They just say, let's stop child abuse. But it is child abuse and neglect, right? We need to stop child abuse and neglect. Because neglect is a form of abuse, right? And it is very deadly. Children die from neglect all the time. absolutely horrible. And if they don't die, they just have to live and suffer in this being neglected. And a lot of people don't realize that there's physical neglect, there's emotional neglect, psychological neglect. There's every kind of neglect you can think of. It's just absolutely horrific. So they said, despite the efforts of the child protection system, child maltreatment fatalities remain a serious problem. Although the untimely deaths of children due to illness and accidents have been closely monitored, deaths that result from physical assault or severe neglect can be more difficult to track because the perpetrators, usually parents, are less likely to be forthcoming about the circumstances. Intervention strategies targeted at solving this problem face complex challenges. So it's a fact sheet provided by the Child Welfare Information Gateway, Children's Bureau. This was put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, and Children's Bureau. And it's just a great bunch of information. I really appreciate what these guys do to put out this information. It's a lot of work compiling this type of data, and but it's so important that we know. And the studies that are done, they're still working on 2010, 2009 studies, really. Like, we won't see anything for 2011 until probably 2013. It takes a couple of years to get this stuff out. This was published in 2010, and the information within this particular article is from 2008. So it's always 2 years behind. And that's just because it takes them that long to gather all this information and then to get it put into document, form, publication form. And they have to verify, and they have to double check, and they have to make sure it's right, It's absolutely crazy what's going on out here with children. And all you have to do is take a look at the headlines. The headlines are a clear indicator of what's going on, like the child abuse headlines. And we cover those on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio Tuesdays and Fridays on purpose. Because the headlines, that's what's happening to these children out here. And if it weren't for those people who are brave enough to report that stuff, first of all, those news stations, newspapers, and different people who will take the time to report this stuff, and feel that it's important enough that it should be reported. Because there's so many children who are abused that never make the paper. There's so many children who die and never make the paper. And there's children that die from abuse every day that we will never see their names in the paper. It's horrific. And, so I believe that we should cover these child abuse headlines, and everybody should read these things and know what's going on with these children out here, because this is these children's reality. This is what these children are living with. Oh, I have a good friend here, my good friend Gypsy Witch from Australia. Hello, dear. I'm glad that you could be here, and I missed you. And so this is why we're doing what we're doing, because this is the reality that these kids are facing. But this information here from this particular PDF is from 2008, and that's because it took them 2 years to get this information together. The National Child Abuse and Neglect Data Systems, which is the NCANDS, reported an estimated 1,740 child fatalities in 2008. And this translates to a rate of 2.33 children per 100,000 children in the general population. So 1,740 child fatalities in 2008. So who knows how many there are 2009, 2010. They'll come up with that information later on down the road. This is absolutely horrific. They said the NCANDS defines child fatality as the death of a child caused by an injury resulting from abuse or neglect, or where abuse or neglect was a contributing factor. See, many children aren't killed outright, but the abuse that they suffer when they end up in the hospital, or they're just left in the home to die from the abuse. They die from the actual abuse that they suffered. So many children do, and we see this in the headlines, right? So it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. They said the number and rate of fatalities have been increasing during the past few years. The national estimate is influenced by which states report data. For 2008, several states reported increased fatalities compared to the year before, which was 2007, which resulted in a higher national estimate. It just depends on year per year. The number does change. To some degree, this can be attributed to improved data collection and reporting, but all the causes of the increase are not specifically identifiable. Most data on child fatality, a lot of child abuse is not reported as child abuse. A lot of children who are killed and murdered at the hands of their parents and caregivers, the parents or whoever killed the child will say, well, the child fell down the stairs, or and if the medical investigators and the coroners and whatnot can't prove any different, then it gets written down as an accident. And this does happen. It's been happening since time began. People have been saying that forever, killing their children and saying it's an accident. But now with the technology that they have, they've got so much better technology. It's so much easier for them to bust lying parents and lying people who kill their children, who kill other people's children, to prove that it was not an accident, that it was intentional, that it was abuse. So it's great because thank God we have this awesome new technology out here that really, clearly allows the investigators, the medical investigators, and the coroners and whatnot to actually come to the truth of the situation, right? Because for so many years before that, parents could kill their children and say, "Oh, it was an accident. The child fell down the stairs or whatever," and people have gotten away with it forever, and they still are, right? Sadly enough, some parents. I mean, I'm sure there's some that slip through the cracks. They admit that, but it's just sad. It's very, very sad. So most data on child fatalities come from state child welfare agencies. However, states may also draw on other data sources, including health departments, vital statistics departments, medical examiners' offices, fatality review teams, and whatnot. So that's where they get their information from. And they said, they go on to talk now, what groups of children are most vulnerable. Research indicates that very young children, ages 4 and younger, are the most frequent victims of child fatalities. That's from the studies that they do. That wasn't just a number that they made up. I mean, but you can imagine, children who are, like, let's say, newborn, which is day 1 to 4 years old, they are so fragile. Their little bodies are so tiny. They're dependent on their caregivers and parents, whoever's looking after them, for everything. And their little bodies and bones are so fragile. And newborns, especially newborns, babies' bones really haven't solidified, especially the skull. And the brain is not full capacity inside the skull, so it's very easy for a child to have a head injury or a neck injury. Their spines and their necks are not able to support the weight of their head because their head weighs so much more than their neck can support. And so, if they're not treated carefully, any number of injuries can happen to a little newborn baby. So that's why it's such an issue with children from the ages of 1 day old to 4 years old, because these little children's bodies cannot take any type of abuse, period, let alone accidents that happen to them. It's very important to protect your children and, from accidents. If you're, there's good parents out there too, I know this, but if you're a good parent and you're not abusing your child, make sure you do, protect your child, because these little kids' bodies just can't take, anything happening to them. They're just so fragile. They said that the data for 2008 demonstrated that children younger than 1 year accounted for 45.3% of fatalities. So children under the age of 1 year old were almost half of the fatalities for that year, while children younger than 4 years accounted for nearly 80% of fatalities, right? So these children are the most vulnerable for many reasons, including their dependency, small size, and inability to defend themselves. And even an 8-year-old, 9-year-old can't defend themselves. The only thing that a child can do is try to especially if it's physical abuse, is you try to protect their head or something. I was abused as a child. I know what that's like, and otherwise they can't protect themselves, right? Little children just are at the whim and the mercy of whoever's looking after them, and that's why we're seeing so many children being abused, because there's so many very sick and twisted people out there who are looking after children who shouldn't be, because they're hurting and abusing children. It's horrific. Just take a look around at the headlines, and it will cause you to want to get involved, right? We have to do something now. I would like to see no more children being abused ever again. And I think it's possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't be bothered doing these shows. I really think that it's going to take a lot of education, and why not? We have stars out there. We have mega stars out there who reach audiences worldwide in one day. All they have to do is some sort of silly thing, and everybody knows that this one star did something silly all around the world. Well, why can we not educate just even in the United States and Canada alone, let alone the worldwide issue? But we're just talking about the North America, for instance. The United States and Canada, why can we not educate our younger children to break the cycle of violence? Why can we not incorporate this into every single classroom? Every single child would have to go through this program to know the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship, to know the difference between abuse and discipline, to know the difference, to know what child abuse is, and to not abuse children, right? So that these younger generations will not carry on the cycle of violence, right? It's really important, because this is the issue. If we're going to stop the cycle of violence and the cycle of abuse, we're going to have to get to the young people, because they are going to be the next future parents. and it will be up to them whether they will abuse their children or not. And it's horrific. No child should ever be abused, and we have to do something, and I think it's all going to come down to education. Education is the key. So it says, how do these deaths occur? Fatal child abuse may involve repeated abuse over a period of time, for example, battered child syndrome, or it may involve a single impulsive incident like drowning, suffocating, or shaking a baby. We see lots of that in the headlines. We also see some of the other stuff that's just, abuse that just goes on and on and on, and the child just eventually succumbs to the abuse, and whether they've been locked in a basement somewhere, and malnutrition sets in, and they've been beaten and abused. Eventually, it takes the child's life, right? It's horrific. It says, in cases of fatal neglect, the child's death results not from anything the caregiver does, but from a caregiver's failure to act. So the neglect may be chronic, for extended malnourishment, or acute. For example, an infant who drowns after being left unsupervised in a bathtub, right? These types of things. In 2008, nearly 40% of fatalities, which is 39.7%, were caused by multiple forms of maltreatment. So neglect accounted for 31.9%, and physical abuse for 22.9%. Medical neglect accounted for 1.5% of fatalities. Who are the perpetrators? It says, no matter how the fatal abuse occurs, one fact of great concern is that the perpetrators are, by definition, individuals responsible for the care and supervision of their victims. In 2008, parents acting alone or with another person were responsible for 71% of child abuse or neglect fatalities. So that's parents. 71%, that's in 2008. More than one quarter, 26.6% of these fatalities were perpetrated by the mother acting alone. Child fatalities with unknown or missing perpetrator relationship data accounted for 17.3% of the total. So who knows who made up 17.3%. So there's no single profile of a perpetrator of fatal child abuse, although certain characteristics reappear in many studies. Frequently, the perpetrator is a young adult in his or her mid-20s without a high school diploma, living at or below the poverty level, depressed, and who may have difficulty coping with stressful situations. So usually a young adult in his or her mid-20s without a high school diploma, living at or below the poverty level, depressed, who may be having difficulty coping with stressful situations. Well, if you look at the headlines out there, most of the people who have killed and murdered their small infant children and toddlers under the age of 2-3 years old, mainly the headlines out there are proving that it's mainly 20 to 22-year-old men and women, well, girls and boys, I don't know, whatever, monsters, that are killing their babies. And it's their own children or their girlfriends or boyfriends' children that they're killing. It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. So that's why we really need to reach these younger generations that are younger than them, because we know that the next set of kids that are coming out of high school here are going to be the next set of parents, right? So we need to reach the kids that are in junior high, elementary, and we need to start working with them so that they know that abuse is wrong, it's against the law, it's not right, and that they need to learn how to handle stressful situations without killing their children and abusing their children. Even if they don't kill their children, they're abusing their children horrifically. I mean, I used to wish my mom would kill me, right? I mean, I used to pray for it, and that's how much pain I was in as a child, growing up in the home that I was growing up in. And I used to wish for death. I wished for the last final blow would be it, right? Because I really was hurting so badly inside, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And the issue is that now, as a survivor, looking back on that, I'm so glad that my parents did not kill me. And the thing is that until you come to the realization that I have a chance to live my life, whichever way I choose. Many of these little children here who are killed every day by their parents and caregivers, these 20, 22-year-old kids who don't know how to look after their children and kill them for whatever horrific reason they decide to do that, they take these child's lives away. And these children will never, ever have a chance to grow up, to know what it's like to experience life and to grow up and have families of their own or make their own choices and do their own things. And, it's horrific, right? It's not right. I'll continue to speak out against this as long as I live, and we've got to reach these younger kids so that they know that this is incredibly wrong, and we need to reach the kids that are really the most vulnerable and at risk, which is the kids who have already suffered in homes full of domestic violence, who have witnessed abuse their whole lives, who will possibly pass on the cycle of abuse. Right, but if the schools aren't funding the programs, and nobody's, a lot of the teachers would probably like to incorporate that into their course work, but they can't. You know what I mean? And so we know that some schools are doing it. That's great, but it's not all the schools. It's just a handful of schools. I mean, this should be a nationwide issue, you know. But that's because children's lives should count, and that's the problem with the people in our society, in our world, is that I guess we feel that it's a certain number of children that is an acceptable number that can die every year due to abuse, and this number to me is totally unacceptable. Like, one child is totally too many. You know, it's unacceptable that anyone would hurt or harm a child intentionally, you know, in any way, whether it's physically, emotionally, verbally, psychologically, sexually, you know, or just neglect. You know, it's horrific to me that these people do this to these children, and you know, the rest of society stands back and says, "Oh well, there's a certain number that's acceptable," because that's what we're saying. You know, by not doing everything that we can to stop child abuse, we're saying that it's perfectly okay, right? And it is not okay. And that's the issue, and that's why, you know, it's so important that we all get involved and make some noise, you know what I mean? We got to get the funding going. We got to get the government to see that our children that these children out here today who are dying at the hands of their parents and caregivers mainly, and some other people who get a hold of them, who are abused and ending up in these children's hospitals, you know, from burns and being raped and beaten and broken bones and everything else, and that these little kids were being, you know, just killed outright, that their lives do matter, that each one of these children's lives matter to me, and each one of these children's lives should matter to everybody, but you know what, they don't. And that's the sad fact, because of what I do. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. I go out, I talk to people about what I do. I talk to people about child abuse. And when I do talk to people, mainly they shy away from me. They don't want to hear about it. And honestly, and I've had people say, why should I care about other people's children? You know, I've had people tell me this. Why should I care? Why should it affect me that other people are abusing their children? Because they're not putting themselves in these children's shoes. They're not putting themselves in these children's places and to see what it would be like to be one of these children out here who are being raped, who are being sodomized, who are being beaten and burned and called names, made to feel really, you know, like low-life scum, thrown down in the basement, locked up, starved, you know, sexually used, exploited sexually. Parents are and mainly parents and caregivers are doing the most horrific things to their children, and society says it's okay. So see, we got to change the hearts and the minds of the people. Everybody should be speaking out against this, whether you have children or whether or not you were ever abused or not. This should matter to us, because every single one of these children's lives matter. They matter to me, and most people would obviously know because you listen to my shows. But the issue is, you know, I'm fighting for all human rights, not just children's rights. I mean, I'm very much a human rights advocate, and animal rights as well. And the whole issue is that, you know, we should all be able to live peaceably here. And children need protection. They need care. They need love. They need nurturing. They need a stable environment to grow up in. And, you know, if parents can't provide that, then they need to do the right thing and get that child to a place, the proper authorities, you know, and not hurt and kill and maim and use their child, you know. It's horrific. So that's why, you know, it's so important that we all get involved, because so much of society thinks that it's okay that we lose so many children every day due to abuse. Well, I don't think it's okay. And I hope a national radio station picks me up. I really do, because I want to continue to speak out against this my whole life. If not a radio station, a television station. I hope somebody does, because I have nothing better to do with my time than sit here and draw national attention to this situation. You know, like if I had the money, you would hear my voice everywhere, and everybody would be so tired of it because they'd be like, "Oh God, it's her again." But you know what? I don't care, because we need to get the attention where it needs to be driven, which is to the government, to say, "Hey, this is not cool. This number is unacceptable. We cannot have any more children dying needlessly. This is not some sort of childhood cancer that comes on a child. This is a choice. People are choosing to kill and maim and torture and sexually use their children and other people's children. And this makes me so sick. You know what I mean? So I'm on a good rant here tonight. But, you know, this is how serious this is. You know, and here we sit in our homes, and what can we do? You know, we can't go put it, like I said before in many of my shows, you know, we can't go put a video camera in everybody's homes and be the big brother and bust everybody, but it's too bad. You know, it's unfortunate, because I'd love to see every single person who abuses their children get busted and get those children some help, you know, and then see these other people who can't have children, who are stuck in red tape trying to adopt, you know, and would love to have a child and would raise that child properly in a good, loving, caring environment. And here we have other people killing their children left and right. What do? A couple years in prison, and then they get out, and then they're popping out more kids to kill and abuse them too, and sexually use them too, and that's exactly what they do. It's horrific, and it should never be happening. And so, yeah, this is just this information here, this type of stuff, very important for people to know. You know, the children are dying every day. People, you know, we have national stuff. We have stuff all over the TV about children dying in Africa. You know what? I'm all for it, because I'm all for promoting human rights around the world and child rights around the world and the right to life. But also, why are we not doing this every day on our own television stations within our own countries to get parents to stop abusing their children and to stop sexually using their children? Right? I mean, this is just sick. It just makes me sick. You know, because for every child that's being abused out there, which is pretty much 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 to 6 to 7 boys, that's the stats, that's the facts. Go get the information, learn it yourself. And, you know, for every one of those kids, 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys who are being abused in some way, whether it's physically, you know, emotional, verbal, psychological abuse, neglect, sexual abuse, 90 to 95% of that's happening within the home. So you think about all these parents out here. We work with these people. You know, we see these people on the street. I talk about this a lot because I want people to know abusers are people sitting right next to you down the block who are sexually using their children. Abusers are people that you work with. But they're not going to come to work and tell you, oh, I beat the crap out of my child and burned my child. And they're not going to come to work and tell you what they did to their children. You know, or cursed my son and you know, now he wants to kill himself because I've been harassing him his whole life. You know what I mean? But there are people out here who are doing these horrific things to their children and getting away with it and feel that it's perfectly okay, totally justifiable. And if you were to ask them and say, why are you hurting your child? They'd say, oh, well, they deserve it, you know. Oh, it's so wrong. It is so wrong. And it's got to change. And the only way we're going to be able to change this is if we start talking about the real truth of this issue. It's mothers and fathers. It's aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas, you know, cousins. It's siblings, brothers and sisters. It's neighbors. It's coaches and teachers. People abusing children. And then they have the nerve to get up the next day and go to work and act like they're just so justified in what they're doing to children. There's people out there who are raping children left and right that we work with. You know it. But you know why? Because 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. That just tells you how many child sexual predators and pedophiles there are out there. Guess who they are? Moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, you know, aunts and uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters. These are the people that sexually use children. They are teachers, coaches, mentors, anybody who has access to a child, right? So everybody's got to start using their heads and start realizing that this has got to change. And it's really a societal issue. So for all of those people out there who think that this is not your issue, it certainly is. And all those people out there who don't want to take responsibility for this, you know, sadly enough, the parents aren't going to take responsibility. These abusive monster parents out here who are doing this to their children and these other psycho child sexual predators and pedophiles. But the thing is, the rest of the world needs to stand up and say enough is enough. No more children. You know, this is it. We're not losing another child due to abuse. We're not losing another child due to abusive monsters who get a hold of children and take their lives. They have the right to life. They have the right to a good life, a good home, loving, caring, nurturing home, the right to education. They have the right to live. And we need to protect their right to life, right? So we all need to stand up and get talking and get busy and start working on the programs that are going to really help these young generations to stop the cycle of abuse, right? So let's get involved. Get involved where you can. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate you being here, Gypsy Witch. I just love you so much. And I'll be back on tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another, talking about childhood trauma to do with abuse. And then tomorrow night, back on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio for a look at psychological child abuse, right? So thanks for tuning in. Have a great night, everybody. And, you know, do what you can to stop child abuse within your own capability, right? Not everybody can be a voice and not everybody has a lot of money to donate, but everybody can learn the signs and symptoms and protect the children within your own home You can protect the children around you, right? And make sure that your own children are not being abused, first of all. Make sure that other children, playmates of your children and whatnot, and neighborhood friends and whatnot that come around, make sure they're not being abused. Do the right thing and report it. And get that child some help if you know a child's being abused, right? Have a great night. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.